And we are live here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. What's up, guys? Nick Scrip on the P2W Fantasy Podcast. I have a solo show today, which I want to do more often. I want to kind of mix up myself hosting some guests and then myself just kind of going on rants and talking fantasy. I feel like sometimes I'm doing a lot of guiding as a host and sometimes not enough talking. And other times I'm talking too much and need some people on the show. So a good mix of everything just makes sense to me. So wild day today in the NFL. Want to talk about some of that. It's been a wild offseason just in general. So what I wanted to do is reflect a bit on what has happened so far in this NFL offseason and who I feel are some of the big winners, especially for the fantasy world. So if you are tuning in, that's going to be the show for today. I got a cool PowerPoint because I'm all professional and shit. So we'll get into that in a second. But as always, this podcast is partnered up with the Fantasy Points Media Group. Go check out fantasypoints.com/subscribe. Use the promo code P2W22 for a discount. It's my one-stop shop for everything I'm looking for as a content creator and also just a fantasy manager in general. So if you're tuning in right now, stick with me. Should be a really good show today. Let's get it.
Play to win, no fear to give. I feel but I can't forgive. I go all in this time, yeah, I won't regret. I'll pick the best on trip, they don't understand. I play to win, yeah, I play to win, I play to win. Yeah, I play to win, I play to win. Oh, play to win, I play to win. Yeah, play to win, I play to win.
All right, so if you are tuning in, today's topic, 3 of my favorite winners this offseason, plus HMs, which are honorable mentions. So a bunch of winners this offseason as far as trades go and free agency and the ripple effect that it has on other players. I want to talk about a few guys that I really liked what happened for them in their situation, and then talk about a couple honorable mentions briefly here. But let's get this a little bit bigger, me smaller. Sounds good. So first guy on the list here, Tua, who, I pulled a clip from like 5 days ago. I said Tua was a sleeper for fantasy, especially for super flex leagues. And at this point now, with the moves that have happened, not so sure he's going to end up being a sleeper based off of where he might go in some NFL drafts. But look at the boxes this guy has checked this offseason of things that are going his way. He's got a new coach, Mike McDaniel, that we saw the clips of. He's excited about Tua. They had the FaceTime on the plane. McDaniel was all hyped up. I think he's excited about Tua. I saw a quote from the offensive coordinator mentioning, this was a week or two ago, that they want to build an offense around Tua. And some moves that we saw today, it makes sense that they are continuing to do that. This offseason, they brought in 2 offensive linemen, Connor Williams and Teron Armstead. They brought in 2 new running backs, Raheem Mostert, who, when healthy, is a very explosive back, and then a pass-catching running back in Chase Edmonds, which does help a quarterback. They re-signed Mike Gesicki, who has a connection with Tua, and we saw some nice fantasy games out of Gesicki. Year 2 of Waddle. We know that Waddle, as a rookie, was very good for fantasy purposes and had a nice connection with Tua in year 1. And then today we saw the biggest news of the week. I know it's midweek here, but 6-time Pro Bowler Tyreek Hill is now a Miami Dolphin, which is huge for Tua because not only does he have his tight end that he's familiar with back, he has his sophomore wide receiver that was a stud back. Now you add some linemen, you add some running backs, you add a new coaching staff, and now Tyreek Hill. A lot of good things in Tua's favor. I think he's a big winner this year. And 11 games played in full in 2021. He had 6 games with 70% or more for his completion percentage. A lot of people were quoting today that the deep ball percentage for Tua actually looked pretty good. I guess it kind of depends on what you consider a deep ball, deep pass. He also had 3 games of 80% or more for his completion percentage. So we saw some good efficiency out of Tua. We saw 2 bigger days in 2021 of over 20 fantasy points. So some upside there. I think he's set up to have more upside. My big question for Tua was, for fantasy, what category of upside could he fall into? He doesn't fit into the big rushing upside category that we see guys such as Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, the Justin Fields, Trey Lances of the world. He doesn't fall into that category. can he fall into the category of having high passing yards and high passing touchdowns? And I categorize that in the past as 300 plus passing yards or 3+ passing touchdowns. Now he's kind of set up to be a guy that can have some passing upside and efficiency even more, because when you have guys like Waddle and Tyreek Hill that can take a pass of 7 yards and take it to the house at any given rate, that gives Tua a big boost in fantasy. And I have a feeling that Waddle and Tyreek Hill are going to be running, routes across the slot, routes, going deep, and they're going to probably play off of each other and have a mixture of that. And I think this offense is going to be pretty dangerous. So when people question the upside of Tua, he's going to be putting the ball in playmakers' hands. And when playmakers make plays and get those extra yardage, it equals points in fantasy for the quarterback. So, a lot of people don't think he's the sexiest of options still. He's set up to be successful. I had him as my QB 15 in Dynasty, and I got some shit for that a little bit. It might be hard to argue that because the system is starting to be set up so nicely for him to succeed. So Tua is one of my favorite winners so far this offseason. And again, there's a bunch of winners. I just want to mention a couple. My other guy, if you guys listen to me talk, I've stuck true to Jerry Jeudy even through the tough times. And there's not been tons and tons of weeks where, I can say, hey, look at that, because he had a bad rookie year, which we'll talk about in a second, which really, I'm not going to put, all on him. Actually, I'm not going to put a lot of it on him. And then his sophomore year, he's really banged up. He had the ankle injury, came back, and then I don't think was himself in some games, and up and down production. But Jerry Jeudy, just outside the top 20 in targets year one. I looked at some stuff on Player Profiler. Number 33 in the league in slot snaps his rookie season, and then number 7 in deep targets. So to me, that means that he was utilized in different areas of the field, and he can run a variety of routes, which is important for a wide receiver to have the ability to be versatile in their route running, which we already knew out of Jerry Jeudy coming out of college. Number 34 in yards after catch his rookie year, which, again, you're not saying, oh, well, it's not top 15. Well, he was a rookie with bad quarterback play. So his rookie season, number 106 in catchable target rate. Number 104 in target quality rating. So looking at the targets that were actually coming to Jerry Jeudy his rookie season, mostly with Drew Lock, they were terrible. So for people to point the finger at Jerry Jeudy doesn't make a lot of sense when he's looking past the 100s in these categories. His rookie year, he flashed a bit. 7 catches for 125 yards and a touchdown week 9 versus Atlanta. Then in week 17, 5 catches for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. So we saw glimpses of what Jerry Jeudy can be. Missed a lot of time this year, not super effective when he did play. Now we got Russell Wilson. This is huge for Jerry Jeudy. And, I think we get caught up so much in the Jeudy versus Sutton debates all the time. Or, Lockett and DK. Who's going to be who in this offense? Who is Jeudy and who is Sutton going to be? Who's going to be Lockett? Who's going to be DK? It doesn't always have to be looked at like that. I can say, I haven't been a Sutton fan for most of his career, in all honesty. But I can say that he's going to be set up well to make some big plays this year with Russell Wilson, because we've seen it out of both DK and Lockett. And then for Jerry Jeudy, I'm going to say we can trust the targets for the first time that are coming into him in comparison to, year one. And then year 2, it's such an iffy year to talk about because he was hurt for a good chunk of it and came back off an ankle injury. But I can expect for Jerry Jeudy a high amount of targets from Russell Wilson. So expecting a high amount of targets from a quarterback is one thing. When we have those high amount of targets from guys like Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, that's a whole different story. So if you believe in the talent of a player and now they have a big upgrade at the quarterback position for the first time in their NFL career, as long as we're banking on health, I'm all for Jerry Jeudy as a third-year breakout. We've seen it in the past from guys like Adams and Hopkins who have that third-year breakout. This could be Jerry Jeudy this coming season. I'm all for it. I expect him to be heavily targeted with some quality from his quarterback for the first time in his NFL career, in all honesty. Next on the list, Michael Pittman Jr. Gotta love a change for him as well, because this past season, he had a big jump in his production for the fantasy world. Weeks 2, 5, 13, and 16, he was the wide receiver. So where he ranked that week for the wide receiver position, wide receiver 13, 14, 17, and 19. So 2, 5, 13, and 16, those weeks he was a wide receiver 2. Good for fantasy, especially for a sophomore. Weeks 7, 8, and 9, he was the wide receiver 8, 2, and 12. So weeks 7, 8, 9, he was a wide receiver 1, meaning he was a top 12 wide receiver for that given week. So if you had him in your lineup, that's very useful to have a top 12 guy on a given week multiple times. So across, just looking at those examples, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks, he was a wide receiver 1 or a wide receiver 2. If we do count week 18, which is outside the fantasy world, but he did have 5 weeks of 20 plus fantasy points and 1 in the 30. So a lot of good fantasy weeks with Carson Wentz. He was number 14 in targets. He was number 3 in route participation, which is routes run per team pass play. Number 14 in red zone targets, which I want to touch back on in a second. Number 15 and number 16 in receptions and receiving yards. And, some might say some of these stats are tied to a quarterback, but I also think that these stats can be tied to a playbook. What is the playbook drawn up to be for the Colts, for Michael Pittman Jr. in an offense? And I like the fact that now he has Matt Ryan. So bear with me on this, but Matt Ryan is used to a guy named Julio Jones that was 6'3". That's what they list him as right now, 6'3", 220. It is eerie that Michael Pittman Jr. is 6'4", 223. So his height, weight is around the same size as Matt Ryan's most productive wide receiver ever. Now, I am not comparing the two guys at all, but he's got his big receiver now, Matt Ryan, in Indianapolis. So, I'm not saying that they're alike, but he's got his big receiver that I think is going to be a big red zone target. Matt Ryan in the red zone quality, I think Michael Pittman Jr. being number 14 in red zone targets this past season, could he sneak to be a top 12 guy? So a wide receiver 1 in red zone targets. I think the possibility is there, even if they add or, change this receiving room at all. I think Michael Pittman Jr. set up to be really successful. He was good with Carson Wentz. I rate Matt Ryan as a better passer of the football, even as he's aging. And I'm excited. Matt Ryan's first season, this past season, not hitting over 4,000 passing yards since 2010. And he was under it by 32 passing yards. You saw Russell Gage have a good season when given the volume. And, I'm not going to say that's 100% on Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan made Russell Gage useful for fantasy. But when a guy like Russell Gage is useful for fantasy and has success with Matt Ryan, I think you should be optimistic about Michael Pittman Jr., who I rate as a better receiver than Russell Gage. So big things to come from Michael Pittman Jr. Some have been saying, well, this might be a year for him to break out. He kind of did already. I guess it just depends on your definition of a breakout, but set up very nicely to be successful with his new quarterback in Indianapolis. So here's my honorable mentions, and I just want to run through these guys pretty briefly. But my 3 favorites for winners this offseason so far, Tua, Judy, and Pittman. For me personally. Other people have their own reasonings. We can go through every player in the league that had a change, but I want to focus just on a handful of guys. But Derek Carr, after the diversity of last season, losing his head coach, losing Henry Ruggs for all the dumb things that he did, having Darren Waller injured for a good chunk of that season, Derek Carr had a lot of odds against him in this past season. And we saw Hunter Renfrow really, really step up for Carr and for the Raiders. Now looking forward, this team in general, a lot of people have been waiting for the Bryan Edwards breakout. We thought maybe Henry Ruggs would take another step, and he's probably never going to play. Actually, he will never play in the NFL again. But now look at Derek Carr's weapons. You got Devontae Adams, Darren Waller at the tight end, and Hunter Renfrow is a wide receiver. And you know what? Josh Jacobs is people want to rip him often and shy away from him in fantasy. I like the guy. He's a good runner, and I think this offense looks kind of scary. In my opinion, I pulled this on Twitter. If I had to have one wide receiver in the league for one season, next season, 2022, to win me a Super Bowl. And then after that, nothing else matters. I get one wide receiver. My pick out of the names of Cooper Kupp and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, you go down the list, A.J. Brown, one wide receiver, who would I want to win me a championship? I'm not saying that the Raiders are going to win a championship, but I'm just saying the quality of the receiver. It's Devontae Adams for me. I still think he's the best wide receiver in the league as of today. Dynasty-wise, no, he's not the best dynasty wide receiver, but getting Devontae Adams to pair with Darren Waller, who still will be a top 3 to 5 tight end in the league next season, and then Hunter Renfrow, who continues to make improvements, Derek Carr's a winner. Leonard Fournette's a winner too, and I joked around about it. He had this meeting with New England that I think was more of a, hey, I'm meeting with New England, Tampa sort of thing. It worked out in his favor. They worked out a deal. I said it was probably leverage for Leonard Fournette to be like, hey, if we ain't getting this deal done, Tampa, then I'm going to go seek out other teams. And then we saw him go and talk to New England, and the Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson managers were kind of shaking a little bit when they saw that, because regardless if you like it or not, Leonard Fournette is going to get his work. So being back with Tampa is big for him in fantasy and him in general, just because he's got a solidified role. Rojo is going to depart. I forgot the team he was going to go see. Chiefs. I think Rojo is going to see the Chiefs. That's what I saw most recently. But Leonard Fournette has a solidified role, and he gets a lot of work in this offense. So total touches for fantasy for Leonard Fournette, very good. The passing work from Tom Brady is nice when we look at that connection. This past season, off the top of my head, because I've been talking about it before, the most 7+ targeted weeks go to Leonard Fournette and Austin Eckler, and the most average targets for the year, so the highest number, was Leonard Fournette and DeAndre Swift. So if you take all their targets divided by the games played, Leonard Fournette, DeAndre Swift. So the targets are there for him. The connection with Tom Brady is there. He's got a solidified role in the offense. He's a winner because he's back where he's going to be most valuable. And he was a great fantasy running back this past season. He was the no running back target, I guess, for some people, but his price should change as far as, redraft goes. And even in Dynasty, if you're looking to acquire him, might not be as easy as it was a week or two ago. But Leonard Fournette should see a ton of work and has that connection with Tom Brady. Juju, I talked about him in the last 2 podcasts, my solo ones last week, but things are shifting around in Kansas City. Do I think that they're going to try to bring in a stud wide receiver from this class? I do. But seeing Tyreek Hill gone, who's been either the number 1 or the number 2 most targeted player in this offense, back-to-back with Travis Kelce, he's gone. We can talk about vacated targets, and it doesn't mean something. It does mean something. His opportunity is just more now. A lot of people question if he's the third option in this offense. What does that look like? Some people compared it to Hardman and Demarcus Robinson and Pringle, which probably shouldn't do because he's more talented than those guys. But also we have to be realistic when we see that Kelce and Tyreek Hill had all these targets for 2 years in a row, but now Tyreek Hill is gone. So he found a new home with a really good quarterback and an increased chance for a heavier target share. So again, I think Kansas City tries to bring in somebody else, but I think that his opportunity as of today is there for some nice volume from Patrick Mahomes, which again is different volume than your average quarterback in the league. Nick Chubb, this might be debatable, but Deshaun Watson in this offense changes the Browns just in general. I think last year, looking at the Browns, I spit it out earlier. I think that they were like bottom 5 in passing attempts. So when he was healthy on the field, when that he is the primary piece of this offense and they're not going to throw the ball a lot, I think defenses game planned about, stopping Nick Chubb, stacking the box, focus on making him unsuccessful, even though he still was successful and still had a lot of good rushing days. But now this offense is dynamic. You got a quarterback, Deshaun Watson, who historically for fantasy has been really good. Historically for NFL stats has been really good. It's going to be more of a dynamic offense. Deshaun Watson with Amari Cooper, being able to spread defenses out, defenses not stacking the box as much. I think being less predictable in an offense makes your team better. And I think Nick Chubb not having all eyes focused on him every single game will give him some opportunities for some open lanes and some looks for him to find space on the field and be successful. I think, I didn't dig as much as I wanted to into Deshaun Watson and his previous running backs and, how that looked out. I'll probably do that for an article at some point. But I'm going to say that Nick Chubb is a winner in this just because his offense is more dynamic and less eyes are on stopping Nick Chubb, who was the primary piece of this offense. Last guy I'll mention, who I feel like hasn't really gotten mentioned too much this offseason for being a winner, is Ryan Tannehill. And the reason I feel like he is a winner this offseason is because he's got more people to throw to. Just simple as that. He did have Julio Jones, but Julio was banged up the entire year. A.J. Brown missed some time. I remember being on fantasy shows trying to piece together who the option was going to be. Was it Fitzpatrick, the rookie? Was it going to be Nick Westbrook, Kinney? Was it going to be tons of Hilliard screen plays? We didn't know what was going to happen in this offense because he had nobody to throw to, and you almost felt bad for Ryan Tannehill. So now, I don't know the timeline for Robert Woods. Always been a Robert Woods fan, but when Robert Woods is healthy, A.J. Brown's on the field, and now Austin Hooper's there, and a lot of people have been down on Austin Hooper, but we also forget that he was very relevant in Atlanta, and he was really good in Atlanta. He was a big piece of the playbook in Atlanta, and Matt Ryan threw the ball to him a lot in Atlanta. So I'm not saying, Austin Hooper is set up to be a tight end one this season or anything like that, but having more options to throw to is huge for Ryan Tannehill because last season, and I didn't even mention it, Derrick Henry was gone, and we had all these guys out of the picture, and I was running routes, I think, for the Titans. So the fact that we got, A.J. Brown and Robert Woods together now, who I think that's going to be a good pairing because, again, I like to see guys that are different and have different skill sets and complement each other in an offense. And I feel like A.J. Brown and Robert Woods will do that. And then Austin Hooper across the middle for some intermediate routes, I think will be good for Ryan Tannehill. And I feel like no one's really talking about it. So that's why I wanted to throw him in as my last guy on this podcast. But again, quick show, not even 25 minutes, but I wanted to give my thoughts on some winners this offseason through free agency and trades. It's been a wild run, man. It really has been. I feel like this has been like a historic year for the movement that we've seen, especially with the quarterback position and then just all the different pieces being shifted around in the NFL. But my favorite three, like I said before, and if you missed it, I'll have this on iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, all that good stuff later, or it's on YouTube. But my favorite three winners as of today: Tua, Jerry Jeudy, Michael Pittman, with some honorable mentions, as you can see on the bottom here, between Carr, Fournette, Juju, Chubb, and Ryan Tannehill. But thank you guys for tuning in. Again, if you missed it, I'll have it out on all platforms after tonight. And I'm trucking away all off season. So if you are not subscribed to YouTube or follow me on Twitter and you're seeing this, or you don't have my live notifications on, put it on because it's going to be a bunch of me talking about my thoughts. It's going to be me hosting some other fantasy football content creators, and it's going to be a good off season to get you prepared not only for 2022, but get you amped up for Dynasty. So thanks, guys, for tuning in. Have a good night.